It was a quiet morning, the kind that makes you believe everything is just fine. I sat at the small kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee, savoring the familiar aroma and the gentle warmth of the rising sun. The house, with its worn-out couches and scattered newspapers, felt like a haven of routine and comfort. My wife, Mary, moved about in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. On the surface, life appeared as ordinary as ever. Yet beneath that calm, something nagged at me. There was a barely noticeable tension in the way Mary spoke, a pause here, a slightly sharp tone there, that I'd never heard before. I told myself it was just the strain of another long day, nothing more. But as I watched her, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more hiding behind that familiar smile. Every detail of our morning routine had its own rhythm. The clink of cutlery, the rustling of a newspaper, even the hum of the old refrigerator. And then there was the camera, sitting unobtrusively on a shelf. I had set it up the previous night as a bit of a personal experiment, capturing moments of our daily life without any particular aim. I had never expected it to reveal anything unusual. At one point, Mary stopped near the counter and muttered something under her breath. I couldn't quite catch the words, but the tone was unexpectedly bitter, almost angry. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and I was suddenly thrust into a realm of uncertainty. My heart pounded, and I found myself frozen, straining to decipher that fleeting sound. I leaned forward, eyes fixed on the camera, wondering if it had captured that unsettling moment. The thought was both absurd and terrifying. Is it possible that something I recorded could change everything? I wondered. The silence of the room grew oppressive, and every sound, the ticking clock, the distant hum of the city, seemed magnified against the backdrop of my mounting anxiety. I took another sip of coffee, the steam briefly blurring my vision, and a strange click echoed softly from the direction of the camera. It was a sound I had dismissed earlier as nothing more than the house settling, but now it seemed loaded with meaning. In that instant, the ordinary morning slipped away, replaced by a creeping dread of an unspoken truth lurking just beneath the surface. I sat back, realizing that this was the moment when my life began its irreversible descent into chaos, a day that would force me to confront the shadows hidden in the corners of our seemingly peaceful world. After that unsettling morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. With trembling hands, I went over to the shelf where the camera sat, my little experiment capturing fragments of our everyday life. I decided it was time to see what it had recorded. Sitting in front of the screen, I pressed play, unsure of what to expect. At first, the footage was mundane. Mary moving about in the kitchen, the familiar clink of dishes, and the soft hum of the refrigerator. But then, the camera caught a moment I'd never noticed before. Mary paused by the counter, her back turned to the camera, and her voice slipped into a tone that was not her own. It was low, tinged with bitterness and regret. In that quiet moment, the background noise faded, and I could hear her whisper, almost to herself, "I never meant for you to know." Her words were barely audible, yet they cut through the silence like a sharp blade. I leaned closer, heart pounding, straining to make out every syllable. "I've been living a lie," she continued, her voice cracking under the weight of an unseen burden. It was as if she was confessing to someone, or even to herself, in a rush of raw emotion. The confession was incomplete, fragmented, like pieces of a shattered mirror. There were pauses filled with heavy silence, and at one point, I heard her say something that made my blood run cold. "It's too late now." The tone was not just one of regret but of finality, as if she believed the truth was already sealed in the past. I couldn't tell if she was addressing someone specific or speaking in a moment of private torment. My mind raced. How had I missed this before? I rewound the tape, desperate to catch every detail. The ambient sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant ticking of the clock, suddenly seemed like a grim soundtrack to her confession. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper. I felt like an unwitting spy in a private drama, caught in a moment that was never meant for my eyes. As the recording played on, the confession faded into background noise, leaving me with a mix of disbelief and dread. I stared at the screen, the words echoing in my head, and a chill ran down my spine. Something was irreversibly broken in our world. The recording wasn't just a random capture. It was a gateway to a truth I wasn't prepared to face. In that final moment, as the tape ended abruptly, I noticed a small, unsettling detail on the screen. A slip of paper on the counter, barely visible in the background, bearing a name I didn't recognize. My heart pounded as I realized this was just the beginning of a much deeper mystery. I sat in the darkened living room, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. The recording replayed in my head like a haunting echo. I kept pressing rewind, desperate to catch every word, every nuance of her confession. My heart thudded so hard I could almost hear it, and my mind screamed that this couldn't be real. No, this has to be a mistake, I muttered to myself, trying to convince my trembling hands that I was overreacting. As I listened again, the rawness of her voice hit me like a punch. "I've been living a lie," she had said. Those words reverberated in the silence of the room, mixing with the steady hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock. I wanted to believe that it was all some twisted joke or a misunderstanding, a slip of the tongue. But every replay shattered that illusion bit by bit. I leaned back in my worn-out armchair, the cushions sagging under my weight as I tried to process the truth. A torrent of emotions, fear, anger, sadness, washed over me. My thoughts raced. Was this really happening? Was the woman I loved capable of such betrayal? A part of me desperately clung to denial, repeating, "It's not true. It can't be true," over and over like a mantra in the midst of chaos. In the silence, I found myself whispering, "What the hell do I do now?" The question hung in the air, unanswered and heavy with dread. I debated whether to confront her immediately or to gather more evidence, to check every corner of our shared life for hidden clues. My mind was a battlefield, torn between the urge for immediate confrontation and a cautious need to understand the full extent of the betrayal. I could almost hear the ghost of my better judgment, urging me to calm down, to think things through. But the raw shock in my veins made reason seem like a distant memory. I remembered every moment, every subtle sign I had brushed off as nothing. Now they piled up like shards of broken glass, each piece more painful than the last. At that moment, I felt trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. My world had shifted, and the ground beneath me was crumbling. I was teetering on the edge of a decision. Should I confront Mary now, risking an explosive confrontation, or dig deeper into the mystery, seeking more proof before shattering whatever remained of my sanity? My hands shook, and my mind raced, caught in a vortex of denial and dawning, brutal truth. The day after that fateful recording, I woke up with one single mission: to uncover the truth hidden in the everyday details of our home. The slip of paper, the mysterious note with a name I didn't recognize, was a burning question I couldn't ignore. I started in the kitchen, meticulously combing through drawers and cabinets, searching for any stray hint that Mary might have inadvertently left behind. Amid the mundane clutter of our daily life, I found nothing that immediately confirmed my growing suspicions, yet the feeling of unease only intensified. "There's got to be something here," I muttered, more to myself than to anyone else. Determined, I moved to Mary's personal space. I hesitated at the doorway of her study, where secrets often hide behind everyday items. Slowly, I began flipping through her notebooks and scattered papers. My heart pounded as I uncovered a handwritten receipt from a boutique, a shop I'd never heard her mention before. The date was recent, and although the total was modest, the store's name carried an air of exclusivity and mystery. "What the hell is this?" I whispered, tracing the elegant script with trembling fingers. I couldn't shake the memory of Mary's offhand remark about needing something special for a friend, a remark that now seemed loaded with hidden meaning. I quickly snapped a photo of the receipt with my phone, hoping to preserve every detail before doubt or regret could erase it. With this new piece of evidence in hand, I turned my focus back to the video footage. This time, I scrutinized every frame, determined not to miss another clue. In one brief, almost overlooked moment, I caught a flash in the background, a small object, perhaps a key, tumbling off a shelf. It was fleeting, barely noticeable, yet it stirred a sense of foreboding within me. Could this object be another link in the chain of Mary's secret life? As dusk settled, I reached out to an old friend, Jack, known for his keen eye for details and knack for connecting dots. Jack, I need your eyes on something, I said into the phone, my voice steadier than I felt. Something's off here, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm missing a piece of the puzzle. His curt promise to meet the next day only deepened the mystery. Every new clue, the slip of paper, the boutique receipt, and that elusive object in the video, was like a piece of a dark mosaic, slowly revealing a hidden picture I wasn't sure I wanted to see. That evening, I could no longer keep the mounting tension bottled up inside. I found Mary in the living room, the dim light casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the darkness creeping into our lives. I stepped forward, receipt and the flash of that mysterious object in my hand, my pulse pounding like a relentless drum. Mary, we need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Her eyes, once warm and inviting, now held a flicker of something unrecognizable, fear, guilt, or perhaps defiance. She set down the book she had been reading and met my gaze with a trembling sigh. What is it you want to talk about? She asked, trying to sound casual but failing to mask the underlying tension. Don't give me that crap, I snapped, holding up the boutique receipt. I found this in your study. And that slip of paper? Who's that, Mary? In the video. I listened to it over and over. I heard you confessing something. Something about living a lie. Her face paled, and for a long moment, silence enveloped us. A silence that was both deafening and accusatory. Finally, she spoke, her tone low and defensive. You wouldn't understand. It's not as simple as you think. Not as simple? Mary, I've been your husband for years. I know you. But lately, you've been slipping away, leaving me in the dark with secrets and bullshit. I replied, anger simmering beneath each word. What the hell is going on? Her eyes flashed with both anger and sorrow. Maybe you deserve it. Maybe you don't deserve to know everything, she retorted, her voice shaking as much as it trembled with controlled fury. I've been trying to protect you from a reality too harsh to face. I took a step closer, my heart pounding and my mind reeling from the raw admission. Protect me? From what, exactly? I can handle the truth, Mary. But all this deception, it's tearing me apart. She turned away sharply, as if the physical act of facing me was too much to bear. You think I wanted any of this? Every goddamn day, I wake up and feel trapped in a lie that I can't escape. I'm sorry if you're too naive to see the cracks in our perfect life. The words hung in the air, each one slicing through the remnants of what we once shared. The room felt smaller, the space between us charged with a volatile mix of anger and despair. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep the pain from spilling over into something more destructive. I'm not naive, Mary. I just can't believe you'd tear us apart like this. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she whispered, I never wanted to hurt you, but I can't keep living a lie. And with that, the conversation hit a dead end. A chasm of unspoken truths and unresolved betrayals stretching wide between us. I stood there, frozen in the aftermath, knowing deep down that this confrontation was only the beginning of a storm that neither of us could control. After that explosive confrontation with Mary, the weight of everything pressed down on me like a relentless storm. I found myself alone in our dimly lit living room, the silence punctuated only by the erratic beating of my heart. Every moment since our argument felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. I replayed the confrontation over and over in my mind, each harsh word and shaky admission etching itself into my thoughts. Sitting on the edge of our worn-out couch, I wrestled with a torrent of emotions. Anger, sorrow, and a profound sense of betrayal churned inside me. I kept thinking, how did everything crumble so fast? Was our love just an illusion? The answers were nowhere to be found. Instead, I felt trapped in a maze of regret and confusion, unable to decide whether to lash out in revenge or to retreat into the only solace I knew, silence. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my spiraling thoughts. It was Jack, my old friend with a knack for seeing through the chaos. I answered hesitantly, Jack, I'm not sure what to do anymore. I confessed in a low, strained voice. Everything feels so shattered. Mary's words, that look in her eyes. They're all I can think about. Jack's voice was steady on the other end of the line. I know it hurts, man, but you need to give yourself time. Don't rush into something you might regret, he advised calmly. Maybe talk it through more. Sometimes, understanding your own anger can help you see what you really want. I sighed, feeling the bitter taste of defeat. It's like I'm standing at a crossroads, Jack. One path screams revenge. The other promises a slow, painful healing. I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. His silence for a moment was more comforting than any answer he could give. Listen, Jack finally said. I can come over if you want to talk. Sometimes, sharing the pain makes it a little easier to bear. The offer was a small lifeline in a sea of emotional turmoil. As I hung up the phone, I stared at the faded photograph of happier times on the mantel. The image of a smiling Mary and me seemed like a cruel reminder of what had been lost. The raw anger battled with the tender memories, leaving me numb and unsure. I knew that the coming days would be some of the hardest of my life. Torn between a burning desire for retribution and a fragile hope for reconciliation, I sat in the dark, wondering if I could ever find my way back from this abyss. The storm inside me was far from over, and I was left with nothing but questions and a desperate need for answers. The next morning, with the weight of the previous days still pressing on me, I resolved to dig deeper into Mary's secrets. While sifting through a box of old keepsakes in our bedroom, I discovered a small, worn envelope tucked away behind a stack of photo albums. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing a set of documents and a passport bearing the name Elena Novak, a name that made no sense in our shared life. My pulse quickened as I realized this was evidence of something far more sinister than a simple affair. The documents were a jigsaw of financial records, travel itineraries, and personal letters addressed to Mary. Each page hinted at clandestine meetings, secret transactions, and plans that stretched beyond our quiet existence. The words on the paper painted a picture of a woman who had meticulously built an alternate reality, a life where she could escape the constraints of our marriage. Driven by a mix of desperation and determination, I dialed the number printed on a sleek business card enclosed in the envelope. The phone rang a few times before a calm, measured voice answered. "Hello, this is Elena," she said evenly. I stammered, "Elena, what the hell is this? How is Mary involved with you?" There was a pause before she replied. Mary trusted me with her truth. She confided in me about her desire to break free. She wanted a life where she wasn't constantly suffocated by expectations. Her voice was soft but carried a weight of finality. "So, you're telling me she built an entirely separate life?" I demanded, my anger simmering beneath each word. "Yes," Elena said simply. "It wasn't just an affair. Mary was constructing a new identity, a life that allowed her to be truly free." Every word hit me like a blow. The unaccounted expenses, the mysterious trips, the subtle hints I had ignored, all were now pieces of an elaborate lie. Elena continued, "I'm sorry you have to learn this way. Sometimes, the truth unfolds too slowly until it can no longer be contained." I ended the call, feeling more lost and betrayed than ever. With the envelope clutched tightly in my hand, I realized that the betrayal wasn't confined to infidelity. It was a full-scale deception that shattered every illusion I had about our life together. Returning home, I sat in silence, letting the shock settle in. Mary wasn't just unfaithful. She had been meticulously weaving a double life, constructing an alternate existence that left me questioning everything I believed about her and about us. The magnitude of her deception was overwhelming, and as the morning light faded, so did the remnants of the life I once thought was real. That night, as darkness swallowed the remnants of our shattered illusions, I stepped into the living room with the envelope of damning evidence clutched in my hand. Mary was waiting there, her expression a mix of defiance and resignation, as if she had been expecting this moment all along. The air was thick with tension, each second heavy with unspoken words. I slammed the envelope onto the coffee table. "Mary, I know everything," I growled, my voice trembling with fury and despair. "I know about Elena, the documents, the double life you've been living behind my back. I have proof. My words echoed off the walls, bouncing around like a relentless storm. Mary's eyes flickered with a mix of sorrow and anger. You don't understand, do you? She replied, her tone surprisingly calm despite the chaos. There are things about my life that you wouldn't be able to handle. I did what I had to do to feel free. Her voice, though soft, carried a weight that cut deeper than any insult. I stepped closer, my heart pounding as the raw truth threatened to spill over. Feel free? By betraying everything we built? By living a lie? I spat out, struggling to control the torrent of emotions. I'm not some naive fool who can just brush off years of trust with a neat excuse. Her face contorted with pain. I never wanted to hurt you, Mary whispered, her voice cracking as she tried to reach out. Every decision, every secret, it was all to escape a suffocating life that I felt trapped in. The admission, half confession and half plea for understanding, only fueled the fire between us. I slammed my fist onto the table, scattering loose papers and sending a final warning into the charged silence. Don't you dare justify this. I deserve the truth, every damn detail. My voice, raw and unfiltered, filled the room, mingling with the bitter scent of regret and betrayal. For a long, excruciating moment, Mary's eyes searched mine, as if pleading for forgiveness or trying to find a way out of this mess. Then, her gaze hardened. You think I planned this all out? That I wanted to hurt you? She retorted, voice low and bitter. Sometimes, the truth is a burden too heavy to bear. I'm not a villain in your story. I'm just a woman who needed an escape. The words hung between us, echoing in the silence of a love that was now irreparably broken. I could feel the finality of the moment pressing in, yet the conversation left more questions than answers. As our heated exchange reached its zenith, neither of us could find a way back. Instead, we stood on the precipice of an uncertain future, with the final threads of our shared life unraveling into the dark unknown. The morning after our final confrontation, I woke to an eerie silence that filled every corner of our disheveled home. I sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by scattered remnants of our shared past, old photographs, faded letters, and the documents that once shattered my world. Each piece of evidence was a reminder of a love that had crumbled into betrayal and ambiguity. I spent the day drifting through our home like a ghost, unable to escape the echo of our painful words. The raw images of Mary's confession and the bitter taste of shattered trust haunted me. I found myself questioning not only her actions but the very foundation of everything we had built together. Was this betrayal merely a symptom of our failing marriage, or did it hint at a deeper, more complex truth that had always eluded me? In a desperate search for closure, I replayed the recordings once more. This time, I wasn't looking for a neat explanation, only for fragments of understanding that might stitch together the torn fabric of my reality. Mary's voice, laden with regret and defiance, played out on the screen. Each whispered word opened a door in my mind, yet none led to a clear answer. It was as if the truth had been left purposely incomplete, a trail of hints scattered like breadcrumbs that disappeared into darkness. Needing an anchor in this overwhelming storm, I called Jack. He listened intently as I recounted my doubts and fears, his quiet words resonating with a somber truth. Maybe some truths aren't meant to be fully understood. His simple statement only deepened my uncertainty, leaving me to wonder if Mary's double life was a desperate bid for freedom or a symptom of a love that was never truly whole. As dusk settled, I stood by the window, watching the distant city lights flicker like promises that would never be kept. In that quiet moment, I realized that the answers might forever remain out of reach. The labyrinth of betrayal and half-truths had led me to an impasse, where every step forward only deepened the mystery. The storm of emotions had passed, but its echoes lingered, a constant reminder that some parts of our story would always remain unresolved. With a heavy heart and a mind filled with unanswered questions, I stepped away from the fragments of our shattered past, bracing myself for a future defined